Chapter 30. Burden of Leadership. Remnants of the Vanguard, heavy with the burden of loss and defeat, returned to base camp. The air filled with sorrow, and their faces were painted with the somber tones of war. A significant portion of their number had been lost in the raid against the Chinese fortification, and the aftermath had been a stark panorama of devastation. Majority of the freed American slaves had also fallen to the overpowering arsenal of armor and weaponry unleashed from the bowels of the earth, marking a profound and painful blow to the heart of the rebellion. Riker, a silent specter of wrath and grief, had been enveloped in a catatonic silence throughout the return journey, his eyes mirroring the storm within. The entire way back, not a word had escaped his lips, the silence around him only broken by the occasional whispers of the wind and the hushed murmurs of his companions. Upon reaching the room where the ill-fated mission had been planned, silence around Riker shattered abruptly. He was a tempest, his rage an unrelenting force, fueling his movements as he kicked and threw everything around in vehement anger. The room itself seeming to contract under the weight of his unspoken anguish and ire. Objects were flung with abandon, their crashes and clangs the only voice to Riker's internal maelstrom. The outline of destruction lingered long after each object had met its demise, mirroring the resonating impact of their loss in the field. His silent agony, now broken loose, was an unrelenting tide, leaving a wake of shattered remnants reminiscent of the broken bodies on the battlefield. In his silent rage, his eyes flickered with the fire of unshed tears, a haunting dance between anguish and rage, painting a portrait of a leader broken yet unyielding, a warrior who had lost much, but was far from defeated. The storm in Riker raged, a manifestation of the sorrow-laden battlefield he had left behind, a silent promise of the storm that was to come. "Alvarez!" resonated through the fractured silence, a raw scream from Riker, who was seemingly oblivious to Alvarez's presence just feet behind him. The air around them vibrating with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. His eyes, ablaze with anger and regret, bore into Alvarez as he demanded, "What the hell happened out there? How did we not know about those armored vehicles?" Alvarez, his face hardened by the events but maintaining composure, responded, "Our recon teams. They couldn't see the entrance. The angle it descended into the ground. It was all wrong. From the outside, it just looked like an empty airplane hangar, sir." Alvarez's voice was steady, but the weight of the words seemed to pull at the edges of his strength. "You need to debrief the ones who were captives immediately. It's crucial we gather intelligence on that facility." Riker, his breath heavy with contained rage, waved him off dismissively. He stood, hands braced on the now empty table, its surface barren due to his previous explosion of fury. His gaze then met the eyes of his other advisors, Major Scott and General Anderson, those who had previously warned against the raid. "Go ahead." Riker's voice was edged with a serrated tone, every ounce of him resonating with a silent challenge. "You were right. So let me have it," he encouraged, his posture weary, as if preparing himself for a barrage of righteous indignations, a reflection of the internal war waging within him. The room was charged with the singing of unspoken words, the silence as loud as the murmurs of unsaid condolences, though Riker remained a pillar of battered resolve. Neither Major Scott nor General Anderson spoke immediately. They exchanged a glance, a silent conversation held in the brief meeting of eyes, before turning to face Riker. "Right about what?" Anderson's voice broke the silence, his words careful, calculated. Riker's head slumped, his body braced for their righteous condemnation. "What? For pushing a mission this large against your recommendations. Don't just stand there. If you've got something to say, say it, and don't treat me like a kid." Major Scott, with a measured tone, tried to pierce through Riker's self-blame. "The mission. It was a sound one despite the losses. Yes, we experienced heavy losses, but the value, the intelligence gathered, that's what counted. In command, the line between the right mission and the wrong mission blurs. It's all a game of educated guesses, based on the best intel available." Anderson, nodding in agreement, added, We've gained insight into their fortifications. The fact that they're digging in, creating underground bunkers, now gives us an understanding of what... Riker, his spine snapping straight, cut Anderson off sharply. "Where's the dirt?" The words, laden with wonderment, sliced through the air, demanding an answer, a piece of tangible truth amidst the labyrinth of questions swirling within him. "Where is the dirt?" The two men blinked, processing the question. The realization dawned on Anderson's face as it displayed confusion and sudden understanding. "Damn, you're right," Anderson said slowly, his voice laced with intrigue. "We didn't account for that." Scott's eyes were deep in thought. "Perhaps they are transporting it elsewhere. Using trucks at night, maybe? Or they've developed a system to disperse the dirt subtly without it drawing attention. But I must admit, that's an angle we haven't yet considered." Riker's eyes sharpened and he pressed further. "We need to look into that. If they are moving the dirt, they would need a route, and that route might be a weak point, a vulnerability." Anderson nodded, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. The sheer amount of earth they'd need to move would require substantial logistics. Roads, vehicles, personnel. If we can pinpoint where they're taking it, we might have an opportunity. Scott looked up, catching Anderson's gaze. "Not just an opportunity," he said with a slight smirk. "A potential target." Sarah, the communications specialist, burst into the room, her eyes wide and voice almost cracking. "The President! You have to come now!" she urged, her words tumbling over each other in a rush. The three exchanged quick glances before following her rapid footsteps to the communications room, her display of hurry infecting the air around them. Her excitement was a contagious energy that had her almost bouncing on her toes as they neared the hub of crackling radios and humming equipment, and as they approached, a voice, unmistakable and known throughout the base, echoed through the room. It was Ivory Hecker, her tones sharp and clear, engaged in conversation with someone who was claiming to be the President. The words hung in the air, charging the atmosphere with a blend of shock, hope, and disbelief. Scott raised an eyebrow, Anderson's lips pressed into a thin line, and Riker's eyes widened ever so slightly as they each silently said the name Jackson and memory association with it. Over the communication system, Ivory's voice was steady, her journalistic professionalism evident. Every word that resounded in the room seemed to carve its mark on the hearts of Riker, Major Scott, and General Anderson. The voice, unmistakably powerful and assuring, it was the voice of a leader, the voice of President Jackson. "Thank you, Ivory. Hello, my fellow Americans." Jackson's voice reverberated, his every word etched with resolve and leadership, something that had been sorely missing. Riker's eyes were fixed on the speaker, his body rigid, muscles tense. 1,000 thoughts were racing in his mind, analyzing each word, each pause, pondering the implications of this revelation. The weariness in his eyes momentarily replaced by a flicker of hope, an ember of belief reignited. Scott's hands were clenched, his eyes flashing between Riker and Anderson, seeking validation, confirmation of the reality of this unexpected revelation. Could it really be him? The question was a whisper, a bare utterance laced with a shadow of hope. Anderson stood still, his countenance a mask of calculated contemplation, evaluating the implications, the possibilities of this announcement. The voice, the demeanor. It's him. But how? Each proclamation from Jackson was like a balm to wounded spirits. "We're building a tremendous army, the enemies of the United States. They don't stand a chance." The room was filled with intensity and restrained skepticism. Every utterance from Jackson, every response from Ivory was dissected, analyzed, and ingrained in their minds. When the conversation reached its end with Jackson's resonant, "God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America, and fight like hell," the room was filled with an almost electric charge, a revitalizing energy unseen for so long. Ivory's words, "Thank you, Mr. President. The nation needed to hear that." seemed to echo, resonating with the silent agreement of everyone present. Riker, still grappling with the whirlwind of emotions and thoughts, finally broke the silence. "Verify. We need to verify this. If it's really him—" His voice trailed off, the unspoken thoughts hanging in the air. Scott, a hint of renewed vigor in his eyes, responded, "If it's him, it changes everything. It's the beacon, the rallying point we needed." Anderson, his of caution and contemplation, concluded, "We proceed with caution, we verify, and we prepare. If Jackson is alive, if he is leading, we have a chance. A real chance to turn the tides." The room, now a conflux of renewed belief in their struggles, became a hub of activity, each person absorbed in their roles, each heart daring to hope, to believe in the light that appeared in their darkest hour.